All right. I'm doing a little test, so if anyone comes on here, it's probably not going to be all that much fun for them. Oh, that's nice. All right. 1 second, guys. I'm just doing a bit of a test.
What's up, everyone? Me and my mate Hendo are about to do a little live podcast. And I've never done this before on Instagram. I don't know if you can tell, because clearly it took me a while to work out what buttons to press. There you are.
What's going on, legend?
How are you, mate?
I'm all right, but I can't hear for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, you must be able to, because
Let
we
me
just said
find out
how
what the
are you
hell's
when you said
going
I'm
on.
all right.
Let's see. Oh, that's working. Keep talking, mate.
Can you hear me? Because I said,
Oh,
how
what's
are you?
happening
And you
there?
responded.
Holy shit. Let's see what's happening.
If your headphones don't work, you can go without the headphones. Or you could, what's your internet like? I can see you.
Oh, there you go. I can hear you, but not on my headphones, that's all.
Oh, okay. Well, you sound fine to me.
Yeah, awesome. How you doing, mate?
Very good. Are you going to have to hold on to that phone, or have you got like a little tripod thing there for you?
I'm going to try and lean it on something so I don't have to.
Yeah, nice. That works.
There we go.
Very good.
What's happening? I'm just going to crack a beer, mate.
Nice. Yeah, well, I should explain what we're doing. We're trying to get a few birds stoned at once on this little call here.
Good idea.
So we're launching a podcast. It's called The Boss and the Brewer. We already have a website. We actually haven't talked about this yet until this live call, which makes it a bit more fun. But we've got a website. We're already in the Apple Podcasts. And this is going to be the first episode that we're going to attempt to do live. And also put the episode in Apple. So there you go.
Look at us go. That was put together very quickly, mate.
Yeah, I got carried away.
Okay,
Tell me
I'm
what beer you're
drinking
drinking.
This is the More Beer Aussie Lager. So shout out to Moz and the crew down at More Beer. Gave them a quick. They had a call with them yesterday. Did him a favour, and surprise out of nowhere, a bloody case of beer arrived on my doorstep today about lunchtime today. So, cheers.
That's very nice. Well, part of my reason for wanting to do this podcast is so I can be part of that crew that gets free beer sent to them. So I'm hoping that's a thing.
Let's make it a regular thing. So if anyone wants to send free beer to us, I'd totally be down for that.
100%.
What do you got there? What do you got there?
So I've got the 8 Wild Feijoa Sour, which is a little bit fancy.
Oh, the classic.
Yes.
It's an absolute classic, mate.
So I went to the bottle shop and I had this beer, and the guy there was like, "Oh, that looks like a fancy beer. It's a bit too fancy for me." And I'm like, "Oh, I've got a brewery. We just did a Feijoa Sour because we just did one for AWOL." And I said, "I'll bring one in for you." And he goes, "Oh, what's the brewery?" And I said, "It's Black Ops." And he goes, "Oh, my son works there, Dean." And I was like, "I know Dean." And he's like, "Yeah, the guy with the beard." And I'm like, "Yeah, I know Dean, the guy with the beard. He looks a bit like Jesus." And then he told me his surname, and it was sort of a weird surname that sounded like the other Dean because he's also got a weird surname. But it turned out we employed 2 Deans, both with weird surnames, both with beards, and one of them I'd never met.
Yeah, right. You've got 2 Deans working for you, and one you've never met. That means you've got a big company, mate.
It's getting out of hand. Yeah, well, this was only a couple of days after he started, so that's in my defense. We've also got 2 Dans that work for us now as well.
Awesome. That's as in 2 others apart from yourself, or?
No, I was including myself in that.
Oh, right, okay. So it's just double Dan.
It's doubled down. All right. Well, this is
Double
we've got
down.
a bit of a loose format here, Hendo. So the first little segment I've got is just a bit of a headline run through, and I'm going to fire off some of the headlines in the beer industry from the last week or so, and you can tell me if you want to talk about any of them. And then a bit later on in the show, we'll go through some sort of bigger questions that we can go into more detail on. But so the headlines.
Yep.
I've got listed down here, Stone and Wood sold. That's been a couple of weeks, but that's still an ongoing headline. Spinifex crowdfunding was interesting. They raised $2 million. Matzo's heading to Queensland, up the sunny coast in New Monday, opening a tap room up there at a pretty reasonable expense. Yep. Gab's Can Design Awards are open, which is fun. The judging for the Indies is this week as well, which is interesting, which I assume you've got something to do with. And
next week, yep.
Next week. And the last thing I've got on here, I only just saw in the Australian, and I don't have access to it, so I didn't have time to read it, but apparently the ACCC are looking into competition in the craft beer sector and looking into the Lion acquisition of Stone and Wood. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, rightio. That's interesting.
Yeah. So you want to tackle any of those?
Oh, well, let's start from the top, eh? Let's touch on the Stone and Wood for the boss and the brewer perspective. That's I think it's been how long now? A week, 2 weeks? I don't know.
A couple of weeks.
Time flies.
Yeah.
But and I've had a bit of time to think about it, and there's quite a bit to unpair for me. I've been pretty quiet about it on like social media and that sort of thing. And I think that there's like a lot of different ways that I kind of think about the Stone and Wood acquisition. I guess when it comes to the beer itself, I feel pretty like indifferent. I don't think it's going to change the beer. Like I still love Pacific Ale and that sort of thing, and I don't think that's really going to change. It's a very accessible beer. I think even though the value of the sale was undisclosed, I think if you go by what's the common valuation these days, is it $20 to the litre annual, or what's it looking like these days, you reckon?
Well, I don't know. I mean, the Australian are printing. The Australian in their headline printed $500 million in their headline, and
that seems fair.
Yeah, and there's numbers in, like the Australian Financial Review put some numbers out on it, and I do subscribe to that. So I saw some of those numbers look very weird, but that number seems to be popping up. But I don't know what the multiples are, and to be honest, I don't think the multiples are relevant because I think they're buying. They're not buying the leaderage and stuff. They're buying an iconic brand. So I think they'd probably just work out how much they want to pay for it.
Yeah, well, what they're buying is, as has happened, before all the times before, with. Bolter, Mountain Goat, Green Beacon, Pirate Life, Four Pines, all that sort of thing. They're just buying market share, and Stone Wood had 1% market share of the total Australian beer market, not just craft beer, because as is the case has been for the last sort of 20 odd years, the beer market in Australia is actually in decline, and so. The two big players, the Lions and the CUBs out there, they want to preserve as much of that share of a shrinking pot as they can. And so, to buy something, to buy 1% of the beer market, it's a no-brainer, really. I think Lion is actually a good fit for Stone and Wood, to be fair. There's, having, worked there, about 3 or 4 years ago or something like that. There's a lot of people in there who are familiar with the Lion culture and that sort of thing. I think if you think back a few weeks, the tell to say that to sort of like, for me, the tell that something was up was when they released the Green Coast as a 3.5 mid-strength in clear bottles. And I think that was the really big tell for me, that something was going to happen imminently. I didn't expect it to happen quite that quick, but it came along pretty quick, because you have to think about it, right? Is what's Australia's biggest selling beer, right? It's Great Northern.
Great Northern.
Right? That's Australia's biggest selling beer brand, right? And that's a CUB brand. And Lion, try as they might, don't have anything like that to compete with. Yeah, they've tried Iron Jack and that sort of thing, but no one fucking drinks Iron Jack, because you got to think about what is it that makes a Great Northern drinker drink Great Northern. Part of it's the price, but I think
Wait, sorry, that was a rhetorical question. I won't answer your question.
I don't mean it as a rhetorical question. I think it's like the people who drink Great Northern think that Great Northern is an actual brewery.
Mm. Yeah, it's a marketing...
Because it's marketed... It's marketed that way, If you look at the billboards, read the labels themselves, that sort of thing. People think that Great Northern is a brewing company. It kind of has this shroud of being not craft, but being a brewing company and taking on some of the characteristics of a craft brewery, of being local,
tied to a location,
all that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Don't know where the fucking location is though, because
Yatla,
it's just the beer from up here. It's
North Queensland and Yatla.
Yeah, exactly. Close, and I guess for a lot of the Great Northern drinkers out there, that's good enough. And so I think Lion buying Stone and Wood, and at the same time Stone and Wood releasing Green Coast as a 3.5% mid strength, gives Lion a real crack at having a go at Great Northern. It's a direct play against Great Northern. Because
would you give them a chance against Great Northern?
Yeah, I'll give it 12 to 24 months. I reckon they'll give it a red hot go. I think if the marketing message around Green Coast and you notice that they're pushing Green Coast as the primary brand, not Stone and Wood, because people think Great Northern drinkers, when they think Stone and Wood, they think Pacifica. They think it's that fruity shit, That's why they're pushing the Green Coast thing. And I think within 12 to 24 months, done properly, executed properly from a marketing perspective, you might see Green Coast having a red hot go at Great Northern.
See, I wonder though if the play is to just focus on the Green Coast brand and not the Stone and Wood, then why did they buy Stone and Wood?
Because they don't have a brand that has this local aspect to it, that local feel. It's cheaper for them to buy one than it is to create one, I would say, because Lion's already tried to create a local brand. They tried Iron Jack, and it just didn't stack up against Great Northern. It's really interesting.
Yeah, interesting. I mean,
that's my perspective on it. Anyway, it's yeah.
So you think it's got a lot to do with that beer? I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. I kind of thought Lion were looking around for some more relevance in craft because CUB have done so well with their acquisitions.
Lion already have a pretty good portfolio when it comes to their craft offering. You got to look at it. You got to look at what Lion do from a global perspective, mate, not just Australia. Little Creatures, New Belgium, Magic Rock. They're all part of Little World Beverages, which is all Lion, right? Yeah. And so from a globe, no one's talking about this, right? Everyone's thinking about it from the perspective of the Australian craft beer market. But Lion's already a pretty big player in craft beer from a global perspective. And Stone and Wood's a really good addition to that portfolio.
Nice. So they'll be a good custodian then, in other words.
Oh, look, if you're going to throw the C word around.
Something just crossed my mind, actually. So Lion at one point owned a share of Stone and Wood, and the founders were friends. This is back in the day. And then when Lion
2010
listed and yeah, and they when they listed, or when Little Creatures listed, when Lion bought a certain chunk of them, they bought their shares back. And it just crossed my mind that if they did sell for the amount that is listed in the Australian website of 500 million, then they would have bought those shares back for not much, and then eventually sold their business for more than Lion sold for. Sorry, more than Little Creatures sold for.
Oh, chit-chat. Yeah, absolutely. Lion waited 10 years and ended up paying a fuck ton more
Yeah,
for the same business. So
amazing. That's pretty good
it's
chess from the
that's
Stone Wood
exactly
founders.
yeah. Back in the early days of Stone and Wood, there was a period there where a lot of rapid growth. The drill, a lot of rapid growth, a bit of crunch on cash and that sort of thing as you're trying to grow. They would have put their hand out to Lion at some point. Back in the early days, I think at the time, Lion said no and Little Creatures said yes, and Little Creatures were independent at the time. Lion bought Little Creatures. I think there was something in Stone and Wood's company articles of association constitution or something like that basically said, if their share of the business got bought out by a major brewer, that they could buy the shares back at an agreed value, and that's what happened. But they would have had to have raised cash.
Put that clause in there.
Yeah, it's paid off for them big time, hasn't it? So yeah, I guess that's how it's all. It swings and roundabouts, mate. It's like it's all just come around again, come to pass, and at the end of the day, Lions picked up a pretty good deal, I think. Even if the valuations in the newspaper is correct, $500 million. It's not a bad buy, to be fair.
Interesting. Yeah, I thought the CUB buy of Bolter was the one. I thought that was the one that one of these companies needed to buy, because that company was just exploding. Their brand was so relevant, not tied to independence, and it was just going to transition so nicely. And Stone Wood will be interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be a little bit different, I think, but yeah.
Well, this is what's going to happen with Stone and Wood now, and this is a well-worn path, right? Is that a major independent brewery gets bought out by one of the multinationals, and the first thing that's going to happen is that every CUB tied pub out there with Stone and Wood on tap is going to kick Stone and Wood Pacific Ale off tap. They'll see they'll see a lot of a lot of blowback from independent bottle shops and stuff like that. They'll see a drop in volume for a short amount of time, and then eventually it'll get built back. It's happened to all of the other breweries that have been bought out. Is they have but then the buyer basically builds it back up again and turns it into a rip-roaring business. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, see what happens. All right, we'll move on to, actually, one more question I've got before we get onto the next section is just whether you're surprised when they announce the sale.
Least surprising news.
Okay.
Least surprising news of 21.
And having worked there, did that affect your opinion?
No, not at all. No, it didn't surprise me at all. I know that a lot of people have been, a lot of negative, commentary out there, about the sale. Some of the negative commentary directed at the founders, probably Jamie Cook in particular. Jamie Cook is a bloody legend in the industry, and I've got a deep level of respect for him.
100%.
He's done so much for independent beer over the years, and was always staunchly independent. Had this independent perspective when it came to Stone and Wood and that sort of thing. I don't want to speculate what happened behind closed doors or anything like that. The three founders are just three great people. The company's full of wonderful people. They're all bloody legends and that sort of thing. Was I surprised? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I just went, oh, okay. Because remember you texted me in the morning that I got announced, that sort of thing, and you're like, what did I say? I was like, you said, have you heard any rumours about Stone and Wood and Lion? And actually had this big message, ready to fire back at you, and I was like, yeah. No, it wouldn't really surprise me if it happened, and so it was just a good fit. I honestly believe it was a good fit, and if it didn't happen this year, it would have happened within the next 5 years easily.
Right. Okay. Well, this makes a perfect transition to our next segment, which is called Hard Questions. And this is where we ask each other the hard questions. And my first question is inspired by a James Atkinson article where he wrote up about the Stone and Wood sale and sort of said, you know, how long can a brewery be independent, and looked at the Mountain Goat sale and Four Pines and Stone and Wood and the others, and sort of came up with the decision that a brewery could only be independent for 18 years. So my question to you,
how long can a brewery stay independent? Yeah, look, I look at brewery ownership like this, right? It's like relationships in life, right? It's got to start. Yeah, here we go. It's fucking deep, mate. So deep. It's got a start, a middle, and an end, right? And so when you decide to start any business, it doesn't have to be a brewing business or anything like that, but when you start a brewing business, there is going to be one of two outcomes that are going to happen. You're either going to sell it, well, probably three. One of three outcomes. You're either going to sell the business, you're either going to go broke, or you're going to fucking die and not run it anymore.
Okay.
Seriously, tell me any other situation other than those three options that would happen whenever you start a business.
Well, you could die and hand it on to your kids.
Well, of course, all right. And so, but the thing is, it's not the founder who starts the business is going to wind up running it forever. That's my point, right? Mm. And
you could own it forever. You wouldn't have to work in it forever.
Oh, look. Yeah, look, you could wind up in a situation like Cooper's, right? The other big independent brewery, right?
But no one seems to talk about
because, well, it's the big independent brewery that they don't like to call independent because it's too big, and being big means that you're not independent. And so if you have a look at what happened with Cooper's, how the business was passed down from generation to generation, diluted, as we go from one generation to the next. And then Lion started buying shares of it off, descendants. And then they end up having to write into their constitution that if you wanted to sell if you were a Cooper family member and you wanted to sell your shares, you had to sell it to another family member, so that it just didn't get diluted, because Lion would have bought Cooper's quite easily without that, but that's the thing, right? Is that which way does a brewing business go when the founders can no longer be in the business? It's either you sell it to someone else, the business goes broke, or you die and you're not in the business anymore. That's really the only three outcomes that can happen.
Well, how long, man? How long have you got?
How long?
Yeah.
How long have you got, exactly? Just because you die doesn't mean your brewery's no longer going to be independent. It depends who you leave it to in your middle, that sort of thing, I suppose. But yeah, that kind of leads to my hard question for you, mate, is how long do you think Black Ops is going to stay independent?
Right.
I saw you like there, mate.
No, that's because I got my brewer's flannel on. It's very hot in here. Yeah, well, I wrote a article about this a few months ago, which turned out to be timely because it was well before the Stone and Wood thing, and it would have been weird if I wrote it after the Stone and Wood sale. But it basically said that we have independence as one of our values, and we like the fact that we own the brewery, but it's near impossible to keep owning the brewery. Like, we've already given up half of it to investors just through dilutions. We've done 11. Well, I'm planning another investment round now. It'll be our 11th investment round in, 7 years. And you're continuing to get debt and give up shares of the business, as just every single year. Every year we run out of money and we need more equipment and we need to expand, and you're just not making enough money to fund that. So, yeah, I hope as long as possible, I would like to get to a point where you can sustain yourself, like Cooper seemed to be at, but it is a bit of a hit to think that Stone and Wood either couldn't get there or kind of just got to that point and thought, okay, enough is enough. But I like to think we can get to a point where we can sustain and expand without continuing to give up equity or without selling to the majors, because I don't love the idea of doing that. But we're 7 years in, if you count the homebrew days. So that's not a bad start.
Halfway to the 18 years, you're half a mountain goat, mate.
Yeah, well, not quite. I'm not that good at maths. I think I need 9 to be half a mountain goat, but close.
Yeah, oh, close.
All right. I should say,
Bit of a go.
for people who are live on the Instagram call, we are recording this with the intention of turning it into a podcast. And that's why we're ignoring you if you ask any questions at the moment, but we've got a segment at the end where we will take questions from the audience, and we've got people who've given us questions on social media ready to answer. But if you're live on the call, we'll take the questions live on the call, but we can't engage too much because it's going to be weird when people listen back to it later. All right, how are we going for time? All right, I got one more hard question for you, Hendo. Are limited release beers here to stay?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, that was quick. Okay.
In fact, if you are the right brewery, you can create a whole business model out of it. I think if you look at one of the breweries here in Southeast Queensland that I'm a fan of, I love Range Brewing. I think I love their beers. The beers just continually get better and better and better, and I'm a big fan of continuous improvement. And they built a whole business model around limited release beers and one-offs and all that sort of thing. They have to, they might make a bit more margin on their beer and that sort of thing, but they would have to do a lot of work to create all these new labels and recipes and market them and names and all that sort of thing. It's a lot of hard work. Not every brewery can do what Range have done, but most certainly it is possible to build a business just solely based on limited release beers. I think the smart thing for a typical craft brewery would be to have a good core range that sells a lot of volume but doesn't make a lot of dollars but pays the bills, and then have a good cracking seasonal release schedule that doesn't sell a lot of volume but might make some good margin. And having a mix and getting the mix right is pretty tough, as you would probably imagine. It's very easy to chase the limited release thing and go for the shiny things and try and make the quick dollars, but man, it can get really exhausting really quickly. And likewise, if you're only selling core range beers and you're not doing any limited release beers, life can get pretty boring pretty quickly, I think. And so I think for the typical craft brewery, there's definitely balance that needs to happen. Are they here to stay? Absolutely. People want to be wowed by something new and that sort of thing, But look, personally, I'm not someone who goes and chases the latest seasonal release, or anything like that. Very, very seldom, I suppose, I do it. I'm not a beer geek. I'm a brewer, but I get where a lot of people like that are coming from and that sort of thing, and why they love the limited release beers. They're here to stay. Whether they'll grow volume, that's a tough one. It's a very difficult market to grow volume in.
So you think
people queue up at the tap room?
Yeah, it's very much sort of like they're kind of doing it based around a location. I suppose you got people like Garage Project in New Zealand who do a lot of new, interesting, weird, and wonderful beers and probably distribute a bit more widely. But yeah,
but they've got a great core range as well.
Right. Yeah. I suppose the question is getting at is I suppose when hazies came out, it was like there's a hazy now, there's another hazy, there's a different type of hazy, and then there's just so many different options that you can go with. Is that going to just, like, are people going to get sick of a different new beer, or is it just going to constantly be a thing where, everyone just wants something new, even if it's only slightly different just because it's new? or is enough changing with what's going into beer and the technology and the materials and the innovation from the hop companies and all of that, that it'll just keep kind of going?
Oh, look, I think that to talk about hazies in particular, that's a whole different. You could go deep down the rabbit hole on that.
We'll save that for episode 2 if we make it that far.
Yeah, I think IPA goes in 10 to 15 year cycles. I think that would be my assessment on IPAs. So hazies, what have they been around? 5 years, something like that. We have 10 more years of hazies to go, I reckon, before the next thing comes out.
All right. Well, I welcome that because I like a good hazy.
Yeah, same. Yeah.
You got a hard question for me? One last hard question for me before we get into fan questions, even though we don't have any fans because we don't have a podcast yet. But...
Oh, well, we've got 16 people watching at the moment, the bloody phones.
That's true. We have had quite a few questions on here too, so we might have a few at the end.
That's way more than none.
It's a lot more than none.
Okay, so here's my question for you. My question for you is I've got a really interesting observation over the last couple of years. We've both been down to Melbourne for the ARBA Awards dinner and all that sort of thing. And I find it really fascinating that every time Black Hops wins an award at the ARBAs, like a trophy or something like that, in the room, silence, right? Or it's not the same reaction as the other breweries get.
Wow.
Kind of makes me think that you might have a few haters out there, right? What do you think about your haters?
I don't think we have that many haters. I haven't noticed that many haters, to be honest. I think, Melbourne, we don't have as strong a following as we do in Queensland because we just have never distributed beer down there and we've never had a presence down there. And I suppose it's a pretty cliquey sort of market, Melbourne. It's they've got a lot of really good beer. They're probably not all that interested in beer from up here. We do not have too many haters. To be honest, I'm not good with that kind of stuff. I'm not good with negativity. I don't know how, like when I'm seeing this stuff about Jamie Cook and Stone and Wood, and I'm seeing the stuff that Bolter get, and I don't know how they deal with it. It would piss me off so much. I'm in most of the Facebook groups. I don't think we get a whole lot of hate in there. And I think I would be the worst person to deal with it. I don't know what's going to happen when we get to the size where the kind of Bolters and Stone and Woods are at, where it's like everyone's whinging about these amazing products they're putting out and it just makes no sense. I think I'll probably quit at that point. I'll probably quit at that point because I won't be able to handle it. But that's interesting about the observations about the ABRA Awards. We'll have to see. Might just be me because in that moment you've just won a trophy and you're like there with Govs and Eddie and all the other Black Ops crew and you're like, oh, yeah, and I'm sitting there like 5 tables away going, fucking room is silent. What the fuck's going on there? It's weird. It could just be, I don't know, but well, it has been a few years since we've won an ABRA too, so maybe things will be different now. We'll have to wait and see if they do it again.
Maybe surprise them or something like that. So
yeah. All right.
It's weird. You would never notice it but I noticed it. Maybe someone's listening who's been on who's on the stream and might have the same observation. But well,
I'm definitely going to notice it next time I'm down there. That's for sure. You thoroughly deserve the accolades you get, and fucking haters going to hate whatever. Yeah. Well, I'm going to be paying close attention next time we win an ABRA and see if anyone's clapping for us or booing.
All you got to do is just go like these ones, like just WWE, just like
Right. All right. So this part of the show, we're going to move on to some fan questions, and my dog is humping my leg at the moment, which is not relevant to the audio of this. I can. Elon, do not do that. So if anyone on the call has a question, please put it in the thread and we'll answer that. If not, I've got some that I put out on Facebook and they're actually very good. So I'll go with the first one, Hendo, from Lauren Clement. How do you decide what's going to sell? Does it become a gut instinct or is there an actual science to tempting our taste buds? I've got an answer for that, but do you want to have a crack at that, Hendo, as well?
How do you decide what's going to sell? I'll let you go first, mate.
Yeah, I think it's got nothing to do with data, and when we've done well with the beer, almost every time it's been pure instinct. And in fact, on my Instagram recently, on the Rusty and Flash show on Instagram, I told a story about East Coast Haze. It was actually it's fast becoming our best-selling beer. It was our worst-selling limited release of 2020, and we just felt the timing was right for that beer to become a core range beer. And we kind of ignored the fact that it didn't sell that well when we put it out as a limited release. And we just backed it in and sent it because we just felt it was going to be good. And we did the same thing with Pale Ale back in the day into cans. It was our first beer into cans. We did it differently. There's no amount of data that could have told us that these beers would go really well. And in fact, the opposite is true. If we listen to all of our fans, the only beer we ever sell would be Code Red. And I just have to constantly explain to people that even though it keeps winning awards, no one wants to buy it because people don't drink a lot of red IPA.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would agree with you about it certainly being gut feel. As a brewer or a boss, you most certainly have to listen to your fans and the people your drinkers, the people who drink your beer and that sort of thing. But you can't be that sort of brewery that asks, hey guys, what do you want us to brew? What do you want us to call this beer?
Yeah.
You got to take the lead a little bit with your punters and take them on a journey, not ask them where they want to go. And I think that if you take them on a journey, and each time just get them to come a little bit further and a little bit further. That's what keeps the interest in the brand and in say a new release or something like that. Most importantly, from a business perspective, and speaking from experience as well, having run a brewing company, you just got to let your consumers decide what it is you're going to sell. You might have in your mind, I'm going to sell, a lager, a pale ale, an IPA, et cetera, but your consumers will tell you what they want to buy, and that's what's more important.
And tell you by their actions of purchasing as opposed to telling you what they say they will buy.
That's correct. Absolutely. 7 days a week, that is absolutely the case. And at the end of the day, as much as, I would love to brew beers that I enjoy brewing, that doesn't matter. What matters when you're in a brewing business is brewing beers that people want to buy, I think a skillful brewer can take, and I'm talking this from the liquid perspective. I don't really give a fuck about labels or anything like that. But from a brewer's perspective, I just want to make beers that take people on a bit of a journey. Stretch the imagination a little bit when appropriate, and sometimes you just got to give people a good smashable drinking beer as well. But at the end of the day, we're in the beer business, and we've got to make what people want to buy. So the smaller you are, the more innovative you can get. The bigger you get, the less innovative you can be.
Right. Yeah. We've got a question on there from Flash. I'm going to come back to that one, but I got another one from Darren Hill, which I like. He said, "What supplies have been hard to get?" And I think I might throw this to you, Hendo, because probably high on our list at the moment of things that have been hard to get is staff, or more specifically, brewers.
Oh, what was the question again? You broke up a little when you asked it.
Well, the question was what supplies are hard to get. But if I think about the things that are hard to get, staff is top of my list.
Oh, so as in running a brewery, what's difficult to get?
Yeah, hops or grain but I think staff.
Well, I would say skilled crew and hops. Would probably be the main things. I think we've got something lined up in the future to talk about the lack of skilled crew and how the brewing business is growing. But when it comes to hops, in particular, brewers in Australia are having to be more forward planning than they used to be, say 5 years ago. You know, when I had a brewing company, I could just pick up the phone and order some Nelson Sauvin and it'd be at the brewery the next day and that sort of thing. It wasn't a problem. You can't do that anymore. You know, every brewery, no matter what size you are, has to contract their hops many, many years in advance. That's changed from the supply side of things in the brewing business, you know, with, Bintani, New Zealand Hops, Hopco, Yakima Chief, Cryer, all these different suppliers into the industry have really forced this change. And I guess that those suppliers just want to lock in brewers for the long term. You know, it's in their interest to contract out. It's in the farmers' interest to contract their harvest and that sort of thing. They're farmers at the end of the day. So but it's not exactly, there are some difficulties around hops, but you have to, if you're thinking of starting a brewery, you absolutely have to think more long term with what you're going to make, because you want to be able to get the hops to make that beer.
Yeah, 100%. We had this conversation this week, and our business is obviously growing very quickly, so it's just impossible to predict the future. Every year we've doubled, so it's like, okay, are we going to double next year? Who knows? But we had a conversation just yesterday about, okay, if we sign up this new deal, well, the size, 20,000 litre batches of beer, and we've got 6 of these tanks. How many hops does that beer use that we didn't think about a year ago? And can we actually get those hops? So it becomes a real challenge.
Oops, sorry. I'm just going to put this away because I don't need that anymore. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Just lost my audio.
No worries. Can you still hear me? I can still hear you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. You sound exactly the same. All right. So Flash's question was whether we were going to expand interstate. I assume he's talking about Black Ops. I don't particularly have any more plans to do any more interstate than we're currently doing. I like the kind of local model, so I don't really have any plans for that.
What are you doing at the moment?
Where's
your focus at the moment?
We have distributors in all the other states, and we sell a lot of beer now to Dan Murphy's, and they distribute for you, and they don't need sales reps, and it's just working for us for the interstate stuff. The idea of putting reps on directly, employing them interstate is just scary at the moment, especially with the COVID stuff. It's just too big. So we're just focusing locally. I think the business can keep growing the way it's currently growing.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, so I've got a question here from Luke from Grandad Jack's. He's a buddy of mine, which is timely because I just talked about this. He says, how can a new brand start up and be profitable while growing without selling products to big companies like Dan Murphy's?
You can't really, can you? Or so the question was, how do you grow without selling your product to Coles and Woolies, basically, Dan Murphy's, and was that the question?
Yeah, but I mean, I suppose my question back would be, why wouldn't you want to sell to those companies?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, it presents its own challenges, as no doubt you're aware, because your volume goes up, and that means you've got to find money, and then the majors don't pay straight away. Longer credit terms and stuff like that, which is challenging.
It's a bit of a myth because when COVID,
when you've got some shelf space.
Sorry, there's a bit of a delay, but I was just going to say when COVID hit, they dropped their terms back to 30 days, and they generally pay on time as well, which is not that easy to get all small companies to do. So it's not as bad as it was.
And absolutely, and that's the thing you can be. Dead set confident in if you put your product into Dan Murphy's, is that when there's a due date on the bill, they're going to pay their bill on time. They're not going to dick you around. If you're thinking of starting a brewery, you need to think about what sort of business model you want to have. It's really difficult and expensive and very capital intensive to be able to be a brewery that grows into Dan Murphy's. And has that big volume and stuff like that. it is possible to be able to be a hyperlocal brewery, have a tap room, have a few bottle shops, turn on all those revenue streams, people buying pints over the bar, people buying takeaway beers from your brewery, cans into a bottle shop, a couple of taps, selling some kegs and all that sort of stuff. And if you're a small brewery and you turn on all those revenue streams, you can do okay. But you've got to choose to really be that, and sort of, I think it's wise to sort of have that spread of those revenue streams. It sort of lowers your risk and that sort of thing. Because COVID, you've seen some breweries that generate almost all of their revenue out of their tap room, and suddenly they've been closed for months and months and months. Looking at a lot of the Sydney breweries and stuff like that. Fuck, that must be hard.
Couldn't imagine.
And so that's why you got to have that. A lot of the Sydney breweries that I can imagine are just doing it exceedingly tough at the moment. Other breweries that have lots and lots of tap points in the inner west of Sydney that haven't sold a keg in fucking nearly 3 months or something like that. Shit, that would destroy an average business. So
100%.
So I think you're starting a brewery, and it's not going to be a big brewery. And by that, as in it's going to make less than 500,000 litres a year. I think you have to sort of have all of those revenue streams turned on, so that you can be nimble, and do it to the point where, like, you don't necessarily have to hire a sales rep, a full-time sales rep. You've got a good tap room. You've marketed your tap room well, and I think that's the key to survival in the future, is being flexible and nimble. But the good thing is most craft brewers are nimble.
Nice. Okay. Well, I think that's probably enough. Thanks for doing this, mate. That was fun. It didn't go too badly. A few delays on the connection.
That's great. I've got to have a beer in the school night. I'm ready for another beer now. So.
Well, I did have in the schedule there a beer break.
How do people find
us? 5
us?
minutes after we had our beer.
Yeah, exactly. So how do people find us, mate?
Yes. Well, so this is going to be a podcast. It's actually already on the Apple Podcast app. So you can go onto the podcast app, search for The Boss and the Brewer, and subscribe to our feed. So please do that. We've also got a website, bossandthebrewer.com. And you can jump on there. If you're not on Apple, there's an RSS feed on there. We've submitted to Spotify and Stitcher, so they'll be up there soon. And we'll see how we go with recording it. This was fun, but with whether the audio is good enough to kind of capture and put onto the podcast, I don't know. So we'll see if we keep doing it live. It's fun to do it live. But if not, we might just record it and chuck it on there. We'll see how we go. You don't learn until you launch, like we discussed before.
Exactly.
Nice. Great. Cheers. Thanks for people who came on live. And thank you, Hendo.
Thanks to everybody who's tuned in. Really, really good. And we'll see you in the next episode.
See you, mate. Cheers.
Cheers.